Hello, I'm Zaire, and I play Minecraft, obviously. And there's a lot I have to say about this thing, Minecraft. So, let's have a chat. I started playing this game for the sandbox and creative aspects of the game. Therefore, to this day, I am still primarily a builder. And as a builder, I have a problem that I feel most builders, if not all, have in this game, which is being too ambitious. In the past, I have struggled a lot with being way too ambitious. I come up with this grand idea, this massive build, a mega base, and I don't have the time to do it. It's kind of frustrating, but I have improved over time. And one of the things that is one of my goals in this season of JuniCraft is not being too ambitious. I do have ambitions. You should still be ambitious as a builder. Don't take this as me saying don't be ambitious. The only way great builds get made is if you be a little bit ambitious. You're not going to improve as a builder unless you're a bit ambitious. But just maybe you don't need to build an entire volcano from scratch in a plains biome where there's no mountains to go off of nearby, just a world height volcano. For the simple fact of wanting to cover up a mob farm, that's, in survival mode, that's a bit much. Yeah. Don't do that. But there are definitely places to be ambitious, like expanding your types of builds that you're doing. I tend to stick within a range of builds, and again, in this season of JuniCraft, I'm trying to experiment a lot with doing things with blocks I haven't really touched yet, and doing designs and terraforming designs that I've never done before. Have big plans, but don't go overboard. With that said, though, a problem I see in Minecraft these days is people building the same thing over and over and over again. We've all seen the medieval house a million times. We've all seen the classic modern house. And to be fair, there are trends. Like, I know gradients is something that's, I don't know if I call it a trend. Ever since Mojang started adding a lot more blocks, they've been intentionally adding blocks that fill in gaps in the color palette. So a lot of what they're doing with the stone materials is creating this gradient of stone materials that goes from black with black stone all the way to a lighter color like regular stone, and they're trying to make a more gradual descent through that color gradient so that gradients are a lot more feasible and possible within the game. Because a few years ago, prior to these recent few updates, which have added a ton of new blocks, essentially prior to 1.12, when the game was changed to allow for a lot more blocks to be added into the game, prior to that, gradients and such weren't really a thing. Now they are. And that's just one example of how the trends in building in this game have been changing over time. So be more creative, experiment with those new blocks, stop sticking to classic medieval houses or like Nordic houses or whatever. Just build something different. Just use a color you haven't used before. Do something different. Be more creative. This game invites creativity, and everyone copies the same thing over and over again. One thing I don't like, and I will make a full-length video about this in the future, is mega bases that are hollow and empty. Even Grian himself mentioned that his base in Season 9 of Hermitcraft feels hollow and empty because it is. because a lot of people, when they make mega bases, when they make mega bases, they don't do interiors, and they're just hollow shells. You don't have to go all out doing a crazy interior. But if you do something on the inside, like add in some floors, maybe if there's a house that has a chimney, actually add a fireplace in it, do a simple bedroom with like a bed and a nightstand, and that's all you need. Honestly, massive pro tip here. Bookshelves go a long way. If you have a blank wall, if you need to fill in a little bit of a space, add some bookshelves, add like a desk, something simple, flower pots and flowers. If you have access to mob heads, those are great decorative blocks. And you can use things like clocks and even tools and items. Anyways, be more creative. Now, a great way to be more creative is to build with a little bit of a story, a little bit of a purpose. A lot of times people make builds where it doesn't really make sense. So like, for example, something that wouldn't make sense would be like building this massive boat dock and then having no way for anything to realistically get in and out of that boat dock. If a ship came to that boat dock, docked and unloaded cargo, and obviously this is all roleplay story stuff, there's not actual ships in the game, I get that, but like just imagine that for a second. Ship docks at the boat dock, it unloads the cargo, and the cargo goes onto like the deck of the boat dock. It's got nowhere else to go sometimes, because like you'll build a boat dock and then there'll be like this massive staircase up to the top of a mountain where your actual house is at, or where your full base is at, or where the town's at. Like nothing's getting up that staircase. Another reason for this would be building a massive boat dock in a lake with no exits. What's going to dock there? It's a very specific example, but still. And this is another thing I'll make a full-length video about. Everyone makes the same exact nether hubs. It's just ice boat tunnels connecting everything. Sometimes it's on the roof, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's huge, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's not even finished, but it's always the same thing. And we had a whole nether update, and nobody seems to want to use the nether to build like, oh, cool nether bases. Anyways, build with a little bit of story. Let's elaborate on that a little bit more. Because Minecraft is a game that lends itself pretty easily to building with a story, building with some lore behind your base, and adding a little bit of roleplay. So let's talk about that. It should not be surprising at this point, after the last few updates we've had, that there is a quote-unquote pseudo-lore within the game. And what I mean by that is there isn't really a lore within the game. This isn't a typical video game where there's a specific set lore, there's a specific set story. This is what happened, this is what's happening, this is what's going to happen in the story. That doesn't exist in Minecraft. Minecraft is a sandbox game, and as a result, the lore hidden within the game reflects that. There isn't a through line. Everything is just little bits of lore sprinkled in and about, and you're meant to piece it together. There is not a single lore of Minecraft. There is the elements of lore. There's the pieces of a possible lore. And it is your job to figure out how you want that lore to work for your individual worlds, with you and your friends, or however you're playing the game. If you want to create lore, that's what that's there for. And I feel like a lot of people get hung up on the idea that Minecraft lore is something very specific, and this thing happened, and then this thing happened, there's this ancient civilization, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want it to be is whatever it is. And this is why Minecraft lends itself so well to lore and roleplay and stories, is because of that reason. It's a total sandbox, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can draw connections between Withers and Soul Sand and Skulk and the Warden, and you can find those connections between the different chiseled blocks looking like different bosses, quote unquote, within game, with like the the creeper on sandstone, the wither on red sandstone. Deep slate has what looks like a warden kind of. Blackstone has what looks like a piglin. Even the chiseled tough block resembles wind or something that has to do with a breeze. And nether bricks have a skull on them, as if a wither skeleton skull or just a regular skeleton skull. It's there for you to piece it together yourself. There are those textural similarities between soul sand and the warden, and there are those mechanical similarities between how Skulk works, and maybe that ties into the Totem of Undying because it also has to do with life, and the Skulk has to do with life. It's all there for you to do whatever you want with it. In the past, I've done a lot of story-based things. I love lore, I love story, I love role-playing in Minecraft. And what I've found in the past is that doing story-based things, doing role-play things, adding a little bit of story to your base, into your world, and to the way you play the game, can really create something special. It can create your favorite bases you've ever made. It can create some of the best experiences you've had in the game. And I would certainly know that. So back in the day, I was a part of an SMP called Unknown Empire. It was a story-based SMP, very story-based, and there was a whole lore behind it. There was a lot of roleplay going on, and specifically, I would like to mention Eston, or Season 2 of Unknown Empire, because the name of the land we were in for Season 2 was Eston. And while the story aspect of the server was the hook that, at least in my case, brought me in, I'm not sure if that's what brought other people in, but in my case, that was the hook for me. And even though that's what brought me into it, it's not necessarily the only thing, at least, that made Unknown Empire so memorable. Or, well, Season 2. You see, I feel I'm not alone in this. I know I'm not. I can't be. I feel like for some very, very, very special worlds in Minecraft, they can transcend just being a Minecraft world and become something else entirely. Once you make enough memories, laugh enough, have enough fun in one world, it starts to almost feel like a place. And when you leave that world, eventually, inevitably, it feels like moving away from somewhere. Looking back on older worlds from years ago, back when you first started playing the game, it can feel like looking back on a childhood home that you moved out of many years ago, but it somehow to this day feels more special than anything that's come since. Even though it wasn't as glamorous, it wasn't the same game back then that it is now. There wasn't as many blocks or mobs or things to do. The game was arguably a lot more empty and technically more boring, but regardless, it's the part of the game that feels the most special. It is that moment when the worlds become more than just worlds. They become places of memories. And I feel like there is a lot of want to look back on that, to look back on what once was, the places you've left, your childhood even, and want that back. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do that, if you spend the whole time thinking about worlds that once were, looking in the rearview mirror, you don't see what's right in front of you. Talk all you want about how good the game used to be, about how much simpler it was in the past. Think about all of the things that the modern game has brought and the excitement that comes with the new updates. Think about how integral the Warden and the Deep Dark is going to be in the idea of Minecraft 5 to 10 years from now. Think about looking back at that time on the Caves and Cliffs update, all 2, technically 3 parts of it, and remember how important that moment was. It's okay to look back on the game that once was, but you can never forget what we have now. But I don't know. That's just some thoughts I had about Minecraft.